Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Now that we've got this technology all worked out, we have two members here today that are going to be with us by Zoom, Representatives Bennett and Kirby. And at this time, we'll call this meeting to order of the House Regulated Industries Committee, full committee meeting. First up, House Bill 68, Representative Heath Clark, and he is designated Representative Bonner to present his bill. I would prefer it.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Here on behalf of Chairman Heath Clark to present House Bill 68. That is LC 364491. What the bill does is to extend the period of time that a service member who's been discharged from the military has to apply for immediate licensure for a number of trades. Those trades include electrical contractor, plumber, conditioned air contractor, low voltage contractor, or utility contractor. Moves that time frame from 180 days out to 2 years. So this says that if a service member is discharged and they meet all the requirements from their military occupational specialty and they pass the exams appropriate for that licensure, that they instead of 180 days, have a 2-year period in which that board could issue that license immediately. Part of this is a result of some issues that service members have had with health issues and things like that would have precluded them from applying within that 180 days. That's the essence of the bill, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions from the committee members? Questions from any committee members? And what would be your number back there, please?
Number 3.
It might be underneath that. It's okay. 3.
Number 3. All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. On line 18, would it behoove us to extend it to 3 years, if not 4 years? The reason why I'm asking is because some certifications, like air conditioning or electrical or welding, it might be a 2-year program. So it may behoove that military member for a bill like this to give 3 years, if not 4 years. So that way it gives them ample time to complete the certification process. And as you've already articulated, do the exam and still have maybe a year or two, because life happens, that they can still apply for the license.
So what this does, just to be clear, it takes the certifications that our service members achieve while in time of service and apply those to this. So I'm not quite sure how that would impact the bill, because what is happening is as those service members come out, say if someone has an MOS that is a low voltage and comes out, they're able to immediately apply for this licensure. And once they pass those exams, there's not a requirement for them to actually go through that course that you're talking about.
Right. I guess, Mr. Chairman,
so I'm just not sure what the additional years would actually provide.
Right. So let me, Mr. Chair, if I may, a follow up. So a clear example is like some of my past sailors off of a aircraft carrier nuclear plant. We have specifics. But when they transfer to the military, to civilian life, they may not have the same either courses or prerequisites. And so then they have to go on to a particular college or trade school to get those prerequisites in order to meet the needs of that particular license. And so it's not always a one-for-one, the MOS and a particular, because there are some sophisticated certifications out there, and I'm using a nuclear program, air conditioning, refrigeration, welding, and so I just want to expand. I just want to expand what you already have listed on line items 4, 5, and say, because we are getting a little bit more technologically advanced, some MOSs may be behind the requirements of what's in the civilian sector. And so much like the 180 days, you're expanding that to 2 years, but because there are some more advanced certifications that you have outlined on 4 and 5, they may have to go for a prerequisite course.
So just to be clear, this would only apply to those trades specified in 4 and 5.
Right.
So I'm not aware of any of those that require any of the timeframes that you're suggesting, years, things like that. And my understanding is that it is in fact a one-for-one swap in terms of their credentialing as it applies to these particular trades. And this, should also mention that the timeframe itself came as a recommendation from the various groups, Vector and some other groups that deal with this and licensing our veterans in this capacity. So.
Any further questions? All right. I might just make a comment on there. We're moving this from 180 to 2 years. That's 1.5 years extra. And if you'll look on line 20, it also says that the board may extend such 2-year license period for an individual applicant if certain circumstances, including health, hospitalization, and other emergencies, would prevent him from making an application. So if it is a bona fide reason, that board can do that through their power. Number 15.
Yes, sir.
All right, what is your, well, give me another number and I'll see if I can.
26.
Well, there ain't 20, there's not a 26 up here.
Mr. Chairman, I was just gonna say this came through my committee and it passed unanimously out with, there was no problem with it in the committee.
All right. Then if you will hold that motion, any other questions from any of the committee members? Any other questions from any committee members? Chairman Ridley, you'll be recognized for your report and a motion if you so desire.
I'll make a motion to pass.
We have a motion do pass.
Second.
We have a second. Do we have any further discussion? Any questions, any comments from any other committee members? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I don't know that if I need to poll the two on Zoom.
I said aye.
Very good. Very good. Thank you so much, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You did, quite frankly, you did better than Mr. Clark, because he would have really had us confused.
I should have let him know.
You were 2 floor leaders. You governor and Clark.
All right. Representative Ballinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the time of the committee and yourself. I am here to present House Bill 273. No, is it 272? I'm sorry. I do apologize. I forgot my glasses and I can't read it. Anyway, this bill just basically changes. Right now, there's a 35%. Brian, what is it?
It's 273.
273. Okay, I was correct. 273. This bill does change right now that in order for a municipality or a county government to have liquor by the package, there is a requirement that 35% of the population has to sign a petition to be able to put the referendum on the ballot. This still allows for the referendum on the ballot, but the referendum on the ballot goes on this on the vote of either the city council or the county commission. It just brings it in line with other alcohol measures, Sunday sales, that sort of thing. It just brings it in line with other alcohol measures. Nothing new or anything there. And I'll be more than happy to answer any questions. This bill is supported by ACCG and GMA. I'll be more than happy to stand for any questions.
All right. Questions from the committee members? Do we have any questions from any committee members?
I think that means I did good.
Well, I would say something has happened because there's no questions here.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I humbly ask for your favorable consideration, committee members.
So the committee members, if I understand, well, we have a question. We have a motion there. If you'll hold that motion for a second. Quite frankly, what this does, this changes the 35% rule for the necessity of holding a referendum for off-premise sales liquor stores. And this would say that you could either do it through a 35% rule or the local governing authority could authorize such referendum. All right. All right. This came from Mr. Williams' subcommittee. Mr. Williams, how did y'all proceed with this?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. It did pass through a subcommittee. It did pass.
All right. All right. Do we have a motion? Mr. Billy, you want to be recognized?
I'll second that motion, Mr. Chairman.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Do we have any other questions? Any questions, comments from the committee? All right. Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Change this legislation. I want to be clear because I got a lot of people back home that have called me about this. This does not take the power away from the people.
No.
The people in local government, the citizenry, the voting populace has to affirm that they want this in their community. So this does not change that whatsoever. I
It
want to
does
be very
not.
clear.
To legalize hard liquor sales, then it would take a vote of the city or the county. All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further questions? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Good bill. Madam Chairman, you're now on your way. Let's see. House Bill 119. Ms. Mathiak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. I present House Bill 119, LC 338510. And like everybody always says, this is a simple bill, and it really is. All this is doing is allowing for enabling legislation for doctors of chiropractic to enter into a professional corporation with medical doctors. This allows for the LLC and gives them the option to be able to practice jointly.
All right. Do we have any questions of the committee members? Doesn't change any of the protocol of either one of the professions. It
No,
only,
sir.
this only affects their business model, so that if they wish to, so that if a chiropractor or a physician, if they wish to go into the same office and through their business model as an LLC. Questions from any of the committee members? I see no 14.
At the appropriate time, I'd like to make a motion.
All right, if you'll hold that motion, this came out of which committee?
Regulatory.
And with the do
This
pass,
passed unanimously.
you're recognized for a motion.
Motion do pass.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Second. Do we have any other questions or comments from any committee member? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Good job.
Thank you, sir.
All right. I'm almost afraid to brag on this committee. You're moving along pretty good. So now we're going to get into some other things. House Bill 124, Representative Williams, Chairman Williams. Would you like to present it from the podium or your desk?
I can do it from the podium if that's, if you'd like. Sure.
Whatever suits you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We heard this bill last session and it passed out of committee, but never got to the floor. It's just clarifying some language, clearing something up. In Georgia code now, under Title 43, under cremation, it means the reduction of the dead human body to residue by intense heat or any mechanical, chemical, thermal, or other professionally accepted process. There was a little hiccup in the law when it was passed before. It said you could do this alkaline hydrolysis if you had a retort also. But what you do, you don't need both and you don't have to have both. As I testified in the subcommittee, this is kind of like the school bus we saw outside, all electric, no fumes, no carbon footprint, no mercury in the atmosphere. It's just a different way to reach an end to a means, which is the end process of cremation. This is being used in 20 other states, and it was actually in legislation and passed in Georgia in 2012. But there was a hiccup in the verbiage. But the Georgia Funeral Directors Association, Bill Hightower, testified at the Senate hearing last year that the GFDA had no opposition to the bill, and I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Chairman Collins.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So right now, the only people that are reducing human remains in a vat or a drum, so to speak, would be doing that illegally. Is that correct?
If anyone is doing it, unless they have a retort also.
Thank you, Chair, Mr. Williams. One other question I had. I know that when retorts, flame-based cremation devices are installed, they are required to get a zoning certificate from the local governing body. Does this change that? I don't see where that's addressed in this legislation here at all.
That would be, I think, under the rules of the State Board of Funeral Service. That's not addressed to in code section. Legislative council could possibly do that, just like a funeral home. If it's put in a town or locality, it has to meet zoning requirements also.
Right. Maybe that's more of a question for lead counsel on that. Can you help us out with that?
All right. Further questions?
I just want to hear from lead counsel on that, Mr. Chairman.
Of course you are.
Obviously.
This bill doesn't address that or change it in any way.
Okay.
So the same environment that we're currently having needs of any of the other processes that currently exist at all, they remain the same, whether it be state or local.
Okay. Just a point of clarification, if I could, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Okay.
Chairman
So I
Collins.
see on line 45 of the bill, it says not to be located within 1,000 feet of a residential subdivision platted. So that's my only concern, is I know that language is also in the rules section. And I want to make sure that we're not going to get into doing away with some of the local oversight and control, if you will. I know in the past, local governments have had a hard time accepting flame-based retorts located within inside a funeral home or funeral service provider. And so they've kind of pushed back on that with the locations. And I just want to make sure in this legislation, we're still going to give the local governing authority the ability to push back on that if they don't want that device located within inside an existing establishment.
Any other questions from any of the committee members? Mr. Kirby?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Williams, is it not true that this technology is already being used throughout the state, such as over at UGA for the cremation of animals and other locations as well?
That is correct. Matter of fact, the first one of these was installed down in Shands Hospital at the University of Florida. The Florida State Anatomical Board purchased their first system for human remains in 1995. So this is not new technology, but it is being used at UGA and the veterinary school. Now, you are correct, Representative.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Kirby. Chairman Collins, as I followed what you said just a minute ago, as I looked through this bill, unless I'm wrong, what this says is it just approves this type of a retort for this type of disposal. Did not change anything else that I could tell, because in the case of local governments, through zoning procedures or dealing with local governments, that wouldn't be covered because they already have that authority not to issue a permit for certain activities, such as a cremation retort. In certain areas, they have the final decision whether they would approve that type of, so there's nothing in here that I see that has any effect on the local governments. And I'm not an attorney, but that's what I read it.
To carry explanation a little further, I can show you a picture of a funeral home with a crematory alkaline hydrolysis system. You don't see anything, do you?
You're doing pretty good as long as you don't show a picture of the.
This is a funeral home operating a gas furnace inappropriately. Downtown in a small southern town, you're seeing black smoke billowing out of the chamber. You got one more. Poteet Funeral Home in Augusta, Georgia, burned to the ground. Operator error. So this can happen. You can actually Google on the internet, funeral homes burnt down from operator error in a gas-fired crematory, and you'll find plenty more. Again, this is a funeral home with an alkaline hydrolysis system that's not working. You don't see nothing. Nothing. The building's not burning down. Black smoke is not billowing out across the grammar school. It's so simple. You press a button. You have 3 buttons: child, normal, obese. And you press one of those buttons and everything is all automated, and it all just does it by itself.
I think you're getting a little bit personal now when you start talking about button number 3. All right, questions. Number 6, who would that be?
Well, I was all with you till you start talking about obesity. Now I got a bit of a concern. Is the charge for the normal adult versus the fat adult? What's the charge on that? Is there an extra fee? Do you charge by the pound? How does this work?
How do you sell your barbecue? All right.
Well, I don't guess I ever have to worry about that, do I? All right, any other questions from any of the committee members?
I do ask for favorable consideration from this committee.
Any questions? Chairman Collins.
One more thing I want to mention too. This piece of legislation is a little different than last year because it does say or other means approved by the board. So this does have to be a piece of equipment that's approved by the state board.
That's correct. I've spoken to them. They can regulate that through their rules.
Another one follow-up comment, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
One thing that does concern me about alkaline hydrolysis, and this is the thing that hasn't probably been thought of, but the hundreds of gallons of water that this takes, if everybody in our state chose to do this as a means of disposition, I don't think we'd have enough water to do so. It's like electric cars. I mean, they're all great and wonderful till everybody goes home at 7 o'clock and plugs up their car and the power grid fails. So there's always some unintended consequences of this, but I do appreciate Representative Williams bringing this bill and clarifying a couple of things that were not done last year in this piece of legislation. Thank you.
Thank
Very
you.
good. Further question from any committee member? If not, what committee did this? Chairman Ridley.
Yes, sir.
Anyway. All right, now we'll go. All right, it did come in my committee, and it, after a lengthy, very descriptive, luckily it was after lunch, about how this works, that it did pass out unanimously.
Very good. And are you making that in the form of a motion?
Yes, sir. I'll make a motion to pass.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? We have a second. Any further questions, comments from any of the committee members? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And ayes have it.
Thank you very much, committee.
And you can just stay right up there. You also have House Bill 354.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just for clarification, all of the funeral caucus signed this bill. This bill 354 pertains to the State Board of Cemeterians and the State Board of Funeral Service. What this does is kind of protect the consumer bill. This gives the authority and tells the State Board of Funeral Service, State Board of Cemeterians, that if they get a report on a funeral home, a cemetery, or someone selling pre-need funerals, that something perhaps is not right, is perhaps they are maybe doing away with the money and they shouldn't. And this is in response to some situations that have happened over Georgia. One of them being the State Board of Cemeterians allowed a cemetery to operate down in Gray, Georgia from 2005 to 2020 with no license. They didn't renew their license. There was no oversight that allowed that funeral home cemeterian to steal approximately $250,000 from unsuspecting families that were making pre-arrangements, and probably about that much more from the Cemetery Perpetual Care Fund. So this is holding some people's feet to the fire. This is not protecting the profession. This is a consumer protection bill. I listened to testimony in that courtroom down in Gray, Georgia, when the families talked about making their pre-arrangements and prepaying for funerals, and they spent all of that money, and now they don't have anything to show for it. No money, no insurance policy, no prepaid service. Matter of fact, that former owner is now sitting in Jackson, Georgia, in a state prison. And so that's what this bill is doing, is getting them to speak up and let the sheriff know in that jurisdiction that there's possible forgery going on, taking place, and also notifying the Attorney General and the District Attorney in that area.
All right. Questions? Number 4, who would that be? All right. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chair. On lines 13 and lines 27, it says, any complaints received by the board that upon investigation shows. Perhaps you want to remove the words upon investigation because they could get around this perhaps by not doing an investigation, the way I read it.
Well, what this is saying in Legislative Council, any complaints received by the board that upon investigation show that there may be violations of state or federal criminal law, create an affirmative obligation on behalf of the board to provide notice of such potential illegalities within 7 days to the Attorney General's office and to the Sheriff's office in that county. So what will happen if someone suspects a funeral home or a pre-need dealer has done something and they make a complaint to the state board starts the investigation, and if they uncover illegal activities, then they notify the local sheriff's department. Did I describe that right, Sean Marie? Thank you. Did that answer your question, Representative?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
I read it differently, but I.
We have
I
two,
accept
we
it.
have
That's
two
fine.
skilled legal minds here.
The way the wording is upon investigation, is it saying that there's an investigation prior to the reporting, or is the investigation happening?
It would be, the way that I read it is that the board would receive the complaint, and if during the investigation, they see conduct of this nature, then they would report it at that time. It wouldn't be just because they get a complaint, they go ahead and forward everything. I think that the point of this is that they're not just like, it's not a pass through from the board to the other officials. It's upon seeing that there's actually criminal conduct, because there could be other reasons why somebody would file a complaint. It might not rise to the level that the board would deem it to be a violation of state law.
I don't know if you call it concern, but I was just saying, if the board doesn't do an investigation, then there's no duty to report then.
I think you'd have to ask someone if
Okay.
that occurs. I can see your
That's-
point that if they never do an investigation, they would not have an obligation to report.
Yeah, that's all. Okay.
Any other questions?
Did that answer your question, right?
Yes, Chair. Thank you.
Representative, I'm sorry. Chairman Collins.
Well, I think one of the problems that these boards have had in the past is not necessarily investigating, but having the legal authority to do anything about it. By turning over what they find to your local sheriff, DA, the AG, I think the local level is where this is probably going to be enforced the most. Wouldn't you agree with that, Representative?
I would. For instance, like that State Board of Cemeterians in Gray, Georgia, those cemetery license expired 2005. And so that particular cemetery was allowed to operate 15 years with no license. There's another situation that the State Board of Funeral Services just handled, that the complaint actually came in March of 2020. It took them until November of 2020 to actually find a ruling against that person. And there's 45 cases of forgery, and there are felonies involved in that.
Right.
So the sheriff of that municipality contacted the State Board of Funeral Service when they were made aware that there was some illegal activities going on. And it was still a couple of months later before they would turn over the records to them. So this is, in fact, allowing the state boards to cooperate with local law enforcement and the local district attorney's office.
All right, any further questions from any committee members? And I'm sorry, what's your number, Mr. Chairman? All right, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to follow up with what Representative Walensky brought up, because reading that, I think Representative, timeliness is the real underlying question here, is it not?
Mm-hmm.
That, just like the description you talked about in Gray, it took so many years that the sheriff may not ever know. It seems to me like, Mr. Chairman and Chairman of the committee, this doesn't address timeliness, enforcing the board to make action. And I think that's what Representative Walensky is saying. Does it need to be an effective bill? I know Chairman Powell always talks about perfecting bills in here, but if you're really after, timeliness and making the board do action in a certain length of time so that the criminal activity can be known. Is that a valid concern? As I guess to you, that's my question.
Yes, sir, that is, and there again, I left the expertise to Sean Marie. And I see what y'all are talking about, but it goes on to say that within 7 days, that they have to notify the AG's office and the sheriff's office. But Sean Marie, do you see what they're talking about? Do we need to do anything any different?
I think what this bill addresses is what does the board do once it realizes that there may be criminal activity. And it does set a time frame on what they're supposed to do when they recognize this activity. This bill does not address how soon or often complaints ought to be investigated, or what time frame once the complaint comes in, what that is. I think part of that may depend on the severity of the complaint, the number of investigators that are assigned by the Secretary of State's office, and that sort of thing. But this bill does not, as I read it, seek to address that. It only seeks to address what happens upon investigation if there's a realization that there might be some criminal conduct. And it does set a time frame on that aspect of it.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, because Representative Williams, it seemed like the description you made of the guy not having a license for 13 years or ever how many years it was, just the board not doing their job. I mean, I just tell it like it is, I guess. And with this 7 days to kick in, they've got to do the investigation and trigger it, to trigger the 7 days. I don't want to hold your bill up. This is fine as it is, but I think there might need to be some kind of additional, another bill or something that causes the trigger.
Well, looking over and all of their minutes are online. I spent the weekend looking over the minutes, and they mentioned in 2005 that he did not renew his license. And then they mentioned it again a couple of weeks or a couple of months later in another meeting. Then they mentioned it again in another meeting. So it goes on and on that they're talking about it, but no one is doing anything. And this is just telling them, and through their executive director, Brad Coleman, would be, I think, possibly in a position when the boards realize that something illegal is taking place, that he would urge them to go ahead and contact local law enforcement. But, and I've got all the minutes from the Georgia State Board of Cemeterians, and they talk about this and the Gray situation, and that there, actually the Secretary of State, Karen Handel, had filed something in Jones County Superior Court, but she never followed through. So I don't know that they realized that they were supposed to do something, and by their not doing anything, harmed a lot of people and cost a lot of people a lot of money. And so that's the basis behind this bill, is to let them know that when you find something illegal, and the old saying, if it quacks like a duck and walks like a duck, it's a duck, go on and report it to the sheriff, not just because they've got an allegation that they point out to the sheriff, because they need to make sure that something is wrong first. But I'm certainly no attorney, and I know that's certainly a question for them, and I think just trying to clarify the intent of the bill.
You got any suggestions? Let's see, number 16, who would that be?
That's me. Yeah, and thank you, Representative Williams. And not to belabor the point, but clearly we bring bills because we're trying to address problems. And clearly there's been a problem that needs solving here. And I guess I'm trying to understand, at what point, this is a process, clearly there's a timeline here from the time that a report is made to the board, then there's the investigative process, and then what happens at the end of that investigative process, whether it's reported or not. I'm kind of curious as to whether or not, from what you have seen, is the problem that the board is not conducting these investigations in a timely manner? Or is it just simply that they're conducting the investigations, but then not following up or not taking proper action afterwards? Because there is nothing in the bill that says the board has to complete their investigation within any, I mean, they could take a week, they could take a year, right? Or they could never investigate. So where is the knot in the chain here? In other words, where's the kink?
I'll try to answer that. The kink is in the board not being proactive. And especially now, since the Secretary of State has moved cemetery and pre-need records back to Securities Division and away from the state board. The state board, we actually had a hearing a couple of years ago, and they came and testified that when they got these reports, they just stuck them in a drawer. They never went over them, never looked at them. Nobody never audited them. Now they're going to Securities Division at the Secretary of State's office. And so they're actually looking at these pre-need reports. But what happened is the State Board of Cemeterians knew illegal activity was taking place, and they never did anything. They allowed it to manifest itself and to continue on and on. Now, they would talk about it and bring it up at various board meetings. What about Cedar Ridge Cemetery? What about Cedar Ridge Cemetery? But nobody ever acted to bring it to a head. And so what the intent of this bill is letting them know you have a responsibility. And those boards, and especially the cemeterian board, it only met, I think, 4 times last year. And all of them were, I mean, they're not meeting monthly. So they're meeting and then they might not have another meeting for, a couple of 3 months. So, you can look at the minutes and see what they're doing, and they're not really doing anything other than just granting license. But actually the board has become, one of those that as soon as they see something, they need to make somebody aware of it. So they're not investigators.
Right. Thank you.
All right. Well, Representative Carpenter wishes to be heard, so we got another country going to be heard from. Number 6.
Thank you, Chairman. I think I agree with Chairman Jaspers. I think it would be wise to address the length of time that the board investigates a situation or a complaint. So, inserting, that the board must investigate a complaint within 6 months, and then obviously during that investigation, you kind of force their hand to investigate a problem. And then when they find a problem or somebody's breaking the law, then they have that 7 days. But I think you're going to, there's an opportunity, I think, if you don't force their hand to investigate, that if it's their buddy or a friend of a friend, maybe they never investigate. So I think what Walensky says, Representative Walensky says, is also to be, should be concerning personally.
Well, first of all, 6 months is too long. Yeah, I mean, 6 months is too long.
All right, number 4. Who's number?
Sure.
All right. Before I recognize you, I want to thank Chairman Collins. He knows me better than I know myself about perfecting bills. And this upon investigation, but while we've hashed this out, I think that you and our council have come up with some more appropriate language. Hopefully, if you would.
Chairman, I have a motion for amendment at the correct time.
You are recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to make a motion to amend lines 13 and 14, and at the same time, line 27 and 28 as they are written the same, to read, any complaints received by the board, and here's the new part, shall be investigated within 30 days of receipt, period. Remove that and upon, and it will say after that, if such investigation shows that there may be a violations of state or federal criminal law, and then it continues from there. But this creates, I think what everybody's looking for is a requirement for the board to move forward within 30 days of investigation and then continue with your intent as well.
Okay.
Did everybody,
Chairman Jaspers, is that?
did everybody hear that, the language? All right, and we're doing this.
And
on
Sean
line-
Marie came up with it, Chair.
We're doing this on lines 27, 28, and 13 and 14 in both sections of it. All right, further questions before we start working on motions? Do we have any questions from any of the committee's members or comments? Now, at this point, this came out of whose committee? Chairman Ridley?
This did come out of my committee and it passed out unanimously with a little bit of the same question that we fixed here on it. And at the proper time, I'll make a motion to pass it.
If you'd make a motion. We have a motion. Do we have a second? Do we have any subsequent motions? You'd be recognized, Representative.
Yes, Chair. A motion to make that amendment. Do I make it again?
Does anyone need for that amendment to be read again? Puts a little bit of clarity in this. We have a second. All right. So we have a motion and a second. We'll go to the amendment first. All in favor? Well, any questions on that amendment? If not, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Now we'll move to the main. Well, secondly, are there any other amendments to this bill? All right, if not, we go to the main bill. We have a motion and a second on the main bill. We have a motion and a second that is passed by committee substitute. Do we have any questions on the main bill as amended by committee substitute? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. You can sit down now.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Belton, bring all of your bills with you, please. Do you have a preference which one? You've got 3 bills. You're going to be doing 2 of yours and 1 for.
I'd like to talk to us HB 34, if that's okay, sir.
Yes, sir.
So HB 34 is going to be Lima Charlie 412650. This bill should look very familiar to y'all because this committee passed it unanimously last year. It passed nearly unanimously in the House and the Senate and was vetoed by the governor because he wanted us to go through a GORC process, which is a Georgia Occupational Regulatory Review Committee. No other compacts have been through the GORC, but he wants this one to go through the GORC. So with the chairman's kind assistance, the GORC is looking at this bill right now. And as they do so, we're in parallel, we're going to consider the bill again. So if this is a compact bill, and I know y'all know this before, but I'll just reiterate, a compact is just an agreement by certain states to get together and recognize each other's license. Your driver's license is a compact, believe it or not, that all 50 states recognize. Georgia belongs to about 39 compacts presently. The reason I'm doing this bill is because we've passed 4 different compacts. The military is requesting these compacts for 2 reasons. One is because they want their military members to be able to operate in and out of these different states. But even more importantly is they want their military spouses to operate in and out of these states freely. The military has said that they have 2 priorities in deciding where they're going to put their missions and their money and their people. And the number 1 is K-12 education. The number 2 is spousal licensures. So what this bill would do is allow audiologists and speech language pathologists to go in and out of Georgia and the other compact states that would be part of this. One of the reasons this is so great, and not so much for audiology, but I'll just go. It requires a submission of a fingerprint check with the FBI, and also enhances telemedicine. The bill is supported by the Georgia Chamber of Commerce, and I'll humbly ask for your favorable submission.
All right. Representative Walensky.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair Belton. You close to my wife is a speech therapist.
Thank you.
So regarding this, I see in the compact, this compact alone requires fingerprinting. Is that fingerprinting for individuals who only want to be in the compact, or across the board for all speech pathologists and audiologists?
My understanding is it would be for all future people who go into the field in Georgia or in any of those compact states would have to get the fingerprint check in with the FBI.
So I may learn a lot about my wife.
You may learn, yes, sir.
All right, and just one quick question. One more quick question. In terms of the designation of home state, I see in section 6, this is echoing. A person in active military gets to designate their home state, but is it assumed that the home state is defined for somebody who's not in the military based on where they reside?
To be honest with you, it's a very weird bill in the sense that after line 94, we get into the compact agreement. And those language, most of this bill cannot be altered at all. Because if we alter it, then we're no longer in the compact. So to be honest with you, I don't know what the answer is, but I do know that if we choose not to do that, then we're getting ourselves out of the compact. The only thing we can change is lines 1 through 94 and still be in the compact.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Any further questions from any of the committee members? Any questions from any of the committee members? If I remember right, this is going in front of GORP.
Yes, sir. Tomorrow.
Which is questionable whether we really need that since it's not creating a board.
The governor wants to go through GORC, so we're going through GORC.
I understand. And am I supposed to sit on that GORP panel?
No, sir. I'm sorry, you are. Okay, sorry.
Or I can designate, but I would have to designate another committee member to do that. Do we have any other questions from any of the committee members? All right, which committee did this come from? Subcommittee? Is that her?
Yes, this one went through the regulatory subcommittee and passed unanimously. I'd like to make a motion do pass.
We have a motion do pass. Do we have a second? Do we have any other questions from any of the committee members? Other than who I may have to assign to take my place on the GORP committee tomorrow. If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and ayes have it. All right.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Next up, would you like to do?
How about House Bill 268, sir?
You're going to be handling Chairman Workhouse's bill.
Yes, sir. Chairman Werkheiser is busy on the slopes of Colorado skiing, in my understanding. So I don't have a lot of sympathy for him today. However, he was kind enough to let me present this bill. It's exactly the same thing we're doing for this time for occupational therapy licensure compact. Just like the other bill, it has a FBI's fingerprint check and also has a telemedicine portion. One of the things I forgot to mention was the fact that it's nice. These three compact bills, because Georgia will be one of the very first states to start the compact, that will be on the board that will decide how the rules are going to be made, and we have a lot of power in that sense. So it's exact same bill except for occupational therapists. Let's stand for questions.
And for God's sake, tell us if the Georgia Chamber support.
Yes, sir, they do.
Makes my day. All right. Any questions from any of the committee members? All right, Madam Chair.
Again, this bill passed through regulatory subcommittee, passed unanimously. I'll make a motion to pass.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Do we have any questions from any of the committee members? No questions? That Georgia Chamber endorsement really blows your hair back, doesn't it? If not, all in favor say aye. Opposed? And the ayes have it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really appreciate it.
Easier, wasn't it? And
Yes,
now
sir.
you have one more bill, 395.
Yes, sir. I'm the Compact King, and this is for professional counselors licensure compact. Just like the other ones, it has a telemedicine portion, and just like the other ones, it has a fingerprint check. One of the great things about this particular bill is just like if you had a disaster or hurricane or, God forbid, a shooting or something at a school or something like that, this would allow counselors from other states to automatically jump into whatever state was having the problem and be able to utilize their services immediately without having to do any kind of jurisdictional harangue. Again, this is endorsed by the Georgia Chamber as well as the council of the board of the counselors in Georgia wants to see this bill. So I stand for questions.
All right, questions from the committee members? Questions from any of the committee members? So what you have here is these licensed counselors. If after a certain rank or session of the Georgia General Assembly, if we needed more than the counselors that are here, they could send them from out of state to calm the nerves of the citizens. Madam Chair, this one also came from you.
And passed unanimously out of our regulatory committee. I'd like to thank you, Chairman Belton, for bringing these bills. I know I was raised on military bases. We moved every 2 to 3 years as I grew up. I have a real appreciation for what this does for the spouses of our military personnel, and not just military. I have a daughter who's a travel nurse who moves in and out of states. So thank you again. Again, this passed unanimously through our regulatory subcommittee. I'd make a motion to pass.
We have a motion. We have a second. Questions? Chairman Collins.
Yeah, could Chairman Belton recommend a counselor for Chairman Powell? Will that be?
Only if my phone goes off and I'm in the well of the house again from an ex.
My sister's actually a counselor, so I'll give you a good hand, sir.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Any further questions? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? You're just doing great.
Thank you, sir. Thank you to the committee. I really appreciate
Tell
it.
Chairman Workhouse he needs to stay on the slopes because you handled that one wonderfully.
I'll tell him you said that, sir. Thank you.
Last but not least, ladies and gentlemen of the committee, this is going to be a quickie. House Bill 305. Chairman Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a quickie. This House passed and the governor signed House Bill 242 in 2019, which was the Massage Practice Act. Since that time, the board has found that they needed a few clerical wording changes or additions rather. So on line 13, you will see what's been added has been approved by a national therapy, massage therapy organization. They're talking about who's doing their CE, and then additional on line 31 through 32, they're referring to the instructors. History's been that our boards could write rules and pass rules after a 90-day public hearing, but those times have changed. Some of our boards are being sued by groups, so we've moved to changing rules in this manner. So this is just clarification. I'll answer any questions.
Very good. Do we have any questions of any of the committees about one of the best professions, licensed professions that I can think of? It's not a laughing matter. They do a great job, these licensed professionals. Questions? Comments? Which committee did this come from?
Regulatory unanimous passage.
We have it, and you're making a motion. Do we have a second? Any questions from any of the committee members? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And Mama Sue thanks you very much. And this meeting is now adjourned.